I'm gonna tell you what happened to us a while back. Me, Dan, and Minjae. We were 17, bored out of our minds, and decided to mess around in a ghost town. You know, to film something sick for Minjae's channel. It was midnight. The crescent moon was barely shining in the sky, giving off this eerie glow, and we parked my brother's car on a dusty road next to a rusty sign pointing to the cemetery. The place looked straight out of a horror movie. Wrecked houses, busted up cars. Dan, as always, was already freaking out, holding the flashlight with shaky hands, saying his grandma used to tell stories about restless war ghosts. Me and Minjae were chill, teasing him, but dude, the second we walked through that creaky cemetery gate, the vibe changed completely. We were inside the cemetery, and Dan was already close to losing it, saying he heard this low whisper, like a sound you couldn't really make out, but it gave you chills. I kept messing with him, saying it was just in his head, but honestly, those crooked, cracked tombstones were creeping me out too. Minjae, super hyped, was filming everything with his camera, pointing at this big cross and saying he saw a shadow move behind it. I thought he was messing around, but when I looked, man, there was this weird shape, kinda see-through, gliding between the graves. Dan started freaking out, saying it was a lost soul, that his grandma was right, and we had to get the hell out. I tried to stay cool, told him to stop yelling, but dude, that whisper was getting louder from all directions. Then things got serious. That shadow, now it looked like a person-shaped blur, was getting closer, and you could hear this strange noise that made your heart race. Minjae, even scared, kept filming, saying he was catching it all on tape, but his hands were shaking so bad the footage must have looked awful. Dan was practically hugging the flashlight, whining that he wanted to leave, saying this was a mistake and we were messing with the wrong stuff. I tried to keep it together, told them to back away slowly, no panic. But dude, I had chills running down my spine too. That thing was floating, not touching the ground, and it looked like it was staring at us. Then Dan, clumsy as ever, tripped over a tombstone and started screaming, making everything worse. Anne's scream echoed, and we bolted into this old house next to the cemetery, thinking we'd be safe from the shadow thing outside. The door slammed shut behind us, loud as hell. Then we heard a different noise, coming from a dark corner inside the house. I turned around, and there it was, not human, a dude with a twisted face, sunken eyes, crooked mouth. Dan screamed it was the devil, and we were screwed. Minjae pointed the camera at it, but the windows started slamming shut, one after another. I shouted for everyone to find a way out, but Dan, in total panic, dropped the flashlight, and boom, lights out. We were trapped inside with that messed up man creeping around, the ghost still outside, and no clue what to do. Man, we were stuck in that pitch-black house with that thing walking around. The floor creaked under us. Then, gross bugs. Giant roaches with long legs and glowing eyes started crawling out of the dirt, swarming us. Dan lost it, kicking at the air, yelling he was being attacked, and tripped, knocking over Minjae. I tried pulling them up, but Dan was flailing so much he made it worse. The bugs crawled up our legs, brushing against our skin. Minjae still had the camera, but was about to drop it. We ran toward a back door, but it slammed shut on its own before we reached it. That dude's groan got louder, the ghost's shadow still moving outside, and Dan just kept screaming. Panic hit hard. We were running through the house with those bugs everywhere and the deformed man chasing us. Minjae found a door to the basement, and we rushed down, thinking we were safe. but the basement floor gave way and I fell straight into an open grave, full of loose dirt and broken bones. Dan, of course, freaked out even more, tried to pull me up, but slipped and fell in too, screaming like the world was ending. Min-jae tried to help, but dropped the camera into the grave, and we heard the man's groaning right above us as the basement boards creaked. Outside, the ghost stood still at the window, just watching. I tried climbing out, but Dan was thrashing so much, the dirt started collapsing over us. Picture this. Me and Dan in the pit, dirt falling on us. Dan screaming nonstop and messing everything up. I tried digging my way out, but the bugs came back, crawling up our arms and biting. Min-jae found the camera, but the lens was cracked, and he started cussing. Suddenly, the basement door slammed above us, and that guy's groans got louder, like he was coming down. Dan, panicking, kicked the wall of the grave, and more dirt collapsed, almost burying us. Outside, the ghost was still at the window, staring. I yelled at Dan to stop, but he was out of it. Then we heard a snap, like the ground was gonna give way again. Buried up to our knees, those bugs crawling up our legs, and Dan wouldn't stop screaming. He was flailing and kicked a bone in the dirt. That terrifying man came into the basement, groaning super close, floorboards cracking. I tried climbing out, but Dan yanked me back, panicked, shouting the soul was coming. Min-jae threw the broken camera at the basement door, trying to break it open. Nothing. Outside, the ghost started moving, pounding on the window. More dirt collapsed, and I felt something grab my ankle. Then I felt that thing yanking my leg, and the grave caving in. Dan screamed like he was gonna pass out, flailing and tossing dirt in my face. Min-jae tried digging with his hands, but bugs climbed up his arms, and he started kicking wildly. That messed-up guy was so close we could hear him on the stairs. I broke free, grabbed Dan and Min-jae, and pushed them up the loose dirt. The basement door creaked and started opening. Outside, the ghost was banging on the window nonstop. We climbed up, but Dan slipped again, dragging us back into the pit. I screamed for him to stop, but he was in shock, and that weird guy was right on top of us. We finally got out of the pit, but the basement door slammed shut, locking us in the hallway. That horrible man was right behind us, dragging his feet, groaning, echoing through the house. Dan, still panicked, ran ahead and crashed into an old table, knocking over a bunch of junk that made a ton of noise. The bugs came back, crawling out of floor cracks, up our legs. Min-jae tried to open a window, but it jammed. Outside, the ghost stopped pounding and just stared. I pushed Dan to keep running, but he froze, crying, blocking the path. The creepy guy was almost on us, and the hallway felt endless. Still running down that hallway, the deformed man nearly catching up, Dan frozen and crying in the way. The bugs crawled up the walls, and the noise was deafening. Min-jae spotted a door at the end and ran to open it. Locked. Wouldn't budge. I shoved Dan to move, but he fell, screaming, knocking over a shelf that blocked the hallway. That thing was so close, we could hear its feet dragging. Outside, the ghost started pounding on the window again. Faster. I tried to bust the door open, but it wouldn't move, and Min-jae yelled that the man was right behind me. Dan, panicking, started punching the wall, and the floor creaked like it was gonna give out again. Dude, the hallway was chaos. Dan screaming and punching the wall, the shelf blocking everything. The creepy guy was only a few steps away, groaning louder, and the bugs crawling all over our legs. Min-jae found a rusty key on the floor and tried unlocking the door. But it broke inside the lock. I pulled Dan, frozen and sobbing, and tried climbing over the fallen shelf. The weird guy came closer, and the house's windows slammed one by one. Outside, the ghost pressed against the glass, staring. The floor creaked even more, and I pushed Min-jae to find another way out. But Dan, panicked, grabbed my leg and dragged us down. That horror guy was so close it sent shivers down my spine. With Dan screaming and yanking me down, the bugs were all over. That horrifying man was so close, his groaning made my legs shake. Min-jae saw a gap in the wall where a plank was loose and started kicking it to open a path. The windows slammed louder, and the ghost scratched at the glass. Dan tried to get up, but knocked over more junk, blocking the way Min-jae was opening. I grabbed a broken chair and smashed the plank, finally breaking through. We squeezed through, but the creepy guy lunged, reaching out. Dan froze again, crying, almost trapping us inside. We jumped outside, and the ghost was right there in front of us. Dan screamed and dropped to the ground, shaking and blocking the way. The deformed guy was still inside the house, pounding on the door we came through, and the noise echoed. The bugs crawled through the cracks, chasing us. Min-jae tried to run toward the cemetery, but Dan grabbed him in a panic, and they both fell into the dirt. I grabbed a piece of wood from the ground and faced the ghost, but it didn't move, just stared. The house door creaked behind us, and the creepy man started pushing through. Dan cried out loud, attracting even more bugs, and we were completely surrounded with nowhere to go. With the ghost in front of us, and bugs crawling up our legs, we realized we were trapped. Dan was on the ground, sobbing loudly, drawing in more of those nasty things. The deformed man kept slamming the house door, and it was about to give. Min-jae grabbed a rock and threw it at the ghost, but it passed right through, and he started cursing. I pulled Dan, trying to run to the car, but he froze, screaming that he couldn't do it. The house door burst open, and the weird guy came out, dragging his feet. The ghost moved in, blocking the path to the cemetery. Dan, panicking, tripped on a root and took us down with him. The bugs covered the ground. The creepy man was just a few steps away, and I started thinking, this might be our last shot. Dan was clinging to me on the ground, screaming, while bugs crawled everywhere. The deformed man was so close, his groaning made me shake. The ghost floated right in front of us. Min-jae spotted a gap between the tombstones and ran for it, yelling for us to follow. I tried to pull Dan, but he was frozen, crying, and tripped again, dragging us into the dirt. The house door creaked behind us as the creepy guy moved in faster. The bugs were biting us all over. I got up, dragged Dan, and ran after Min-jae, but the ghost shifted, blocking us from the car. Dan screamed loud again, drawing even more bugs, and I knew we were seconds from not making it. Dan kept screaming, hanging on to me while we ran, bugs crawling up our legs. The deformed guy stepped out of the house, dragging his feet, his groaning louder than ever. The ghost floated in front of us, blocking the car. Min-jae spotted the hood, shining under the crescent moon, and yelled to keep going. I tried to drag Dan, but he froze, fell again, and pulled us back down. The bugs were everywhere, biting nonstop. I jumped up fast, shoved Min-jae toward the car. But Dan cried even louder, drawing the creepy guy in. The house doors slammed behind us, one after another. The ghost came in closer, nearly reaching us, and the car was so close, but Dan was slowing us down. I rushed toward the car, dragging Dan, who wouldn't stop screaming, bugs crawling all over his legs. The deformed man was right behind us, groaning louder, coming from the house. The ghost floated in front of the car door, blocking it. Min-jae made it to the hood but realized the key was gone, lost somewhere in the dirt. Dan, panicking, started kicking the ground, bringing more of those nasty bugs. I searched blindly for the key in the dark, but the creepy guy was closing in fast, and the house windows kept slamming like crazy. Minjae screamed to run to the cemetery, but Dan froze again, falling and dragging me down with him. The ghost was almost on top of us, and we were so close to the car, but without the key we couldn't get away. I was on the ground, Dan clutching me, screaming. The deformed guy was right there, his groaning echoing all around. The ghost floated even closer, cutting off any chance of reaching the car. Minjae was feeling through the dirt, searching for the key, but only found more disgusting bugs. Dan, in a panic, tried to run toward the cemetery, but tripped and dragged me down with him. I tried getting up, but Dan was frozen, sobbing loud. The ghost stood in front of us, the creepy guy behind, and the moon gave off barely any light. I started thinking there really was no way out. I tried breaking free from Dan, who was crying and holding me on the ground. The deformed guy was only steps away, groaning louder. The ghost floated closer, and Minjae shouted. He'd found the key. I ran to grab it, but Dan, panicking, grabbed my leg and pulled me down again. The creepy guy advanced, and the windows slammed harder. I got up, dragged Minjae to the car, but Dan stayed behind, still screaming. The ghost blocked the path, almost touching us. I managed to open the car door, shoved Minjae inside, but the weird guy was so close I could hear his footsteps. Dan finally ran and fell again. I didn't know if I could save everyone. I shouted for Dan to get up, but he was still on the ground, crying, bugs crawling up him. The creepy man was almost on us, his groaning deafening. The ghost floated closer, blocking the car door. Minjae started the engine, yelling for me to get in. I tried to pull Dan, but he froze, clutching the dirt, completely panicked. The deformed guy came fast, and the windows of the house slammed louder. I threw another rock at the ghost, but again, it went right through. Dan finally started crawling, but the weird man grabbed his leg. I ran to the car, jumped in, and Minjae hit the gas, but I saw Dan being dragged back, screaming. As the ghost and the creepy guy closed in around him, Minjae floored it, the car skidding over the dirt. I tried to open the door to pull Dan in, but another ghost floated over us, blocking everything. Bugs climbed onto the hood, covering the windshield. The creepy man dragged Dan back toward the house, and the door slammed shut. I looked in the rearview mirror, but Dan was gone in the darkness, still screaming. Minjae cursed, hitting the wheel, while I tried to see through the side window. The ghost stood still in the road, staring. The house windows stopped slamming, and everything went quiet. But I knew Dan was still in there with that deformed man. Minjae kept driving, swerving around the ghost who just stood there, watching. The bugs fell off the hood, and the car skidded again on the dirt road. The deformed guy didn't show up again, but I could still hear his groaning echo. I looked back, expecting to see him, but there was only darkness. Minjae didn't say a word, just drove, and I couldn't stop thinking about Dan, stuck in that house. The moon barely lit the road, and we got out of there, knowing we'd never go back. I looked back, but the ghost town vanished into the dark. Minjae drove with a death grip on the wheel, silent. I kept thinking about Dan, trapped with the deformed man and the ghost that nearly got us. The bugs were gone, but I could still feel them on my skin. I tried to speak, but my throat locked up. The car jolted on the road, and the moon disappeared behind the trees. We left Dan behind, and that weight never left me. We made it to the city, and Minjae parked without saying a word. I just stared at nothing, thinking about Dan, picturing him stuck in that house. I couldn't sleep, just kept seeing the creepy guy and that ghost in my head.